And I now give the floor to His Excellency Carlos Rafael Faría Tortosa, Minister of the People's Power for Foreign Affairs of the Bolivarian Republic of Venezuela.
Carta.
Letter from the President Maduro's to the peoples of the world. Good afternoon to all those present from the Bolivarian Republic of Venezuela. On behalf of the constitutional President Nicolas Maduro, we extend a welcome, a brotherly welcome, to the presidents, heads of state and government, and prime ministers of the 193 countries that make up the United Nations organization. In the same way, we would like to greet the Secretary General, Antonio Guterres, and also Dr. Chaba Kiroshi, President of the General Assembly of the United Nations, and the other authorities present here at the 77th Annual General Assembly, and we wish you every success in this important exchange of ideas for timely and collective action to face our common problems. I'd like to take the time allotted to me in this forum on behalf of the 30 million Venezuelan men and women to send an open letter to humanity, because I don't think that anything else would give proper meaning to a governor of the 21st century, particularly at such a crucial time for the world, when what we need is more leadership for the peoples in order to create alternatives to transform our reality. We've never been so aware that we are one single community, one and very many at the same time, as we are aware now in this situation that we find ourselves in. Life itself. This letter comes from the heart of the Bolivarian Republic of Venezuela, a country that a lot of people have heard people talk about, but paradoxically, not very many people know much about its genuine political truth, its historic identity, and its concrete reality. Certainly, a pernicious global campaign has been woven to discredit and stigmatize our people, our republican institutions, and our democratic revolution, for the simple fact of having challenged the power structures of the last century and the single way of thinking that has placed the world under the mask of the market economy and the neoliberal globalization, a model which has become the modern version of colonialization, supposedly in the name of liberty. The aim of this campaign against Venezuela is nothing more than to create objective conditions to politically and economically choke any attempt to create alternatives to an imperialistic and a depredatory system, which is capitalism that we've seen in all its historical phases. Imposing a false narrative on us, they accuse us of being a dictatorship and a failed state in order to hide the truth from the world. Over the last 2 decades, in my country, we have held 29 free elections that have defined our social, economic, and political model that we have called Bolivarian socialism. This is the reason why we have been attacked in very many different ways. The people of the world should know that Venezuela has experienced all attempts to destabilize our democracy. Politically, imperialism has failed in its illegal way of trying to bring about regime change, including attempted assassination, invasion. They have created seditious movements against the constitution, and they have even invented a fictitious parallel government which bordered on the ridiculous. Economically, not many know that in this small but dignified country, applying to us are 913 illegal sanctions, which, in summary, prevent my people from buying and selling what they produce and what they need for their development and in order to enjoy our individual and collective existence. This specifically leads to suffering, to privation, and to systematic aggression that restricts the life and collective rights of my country, and that's why we must denounce these cruel measures as crimes against humanity. This economic war, the losses of which for my country exceed $150 billion over the last few years, increased during the most serious period of the pandemic, making it impossible for us to buy medical supplies, medicines and vaccines. The stigmatization has also served the purposes of Europe and the United States as an excuse to further pillage our heritage and our assets abroad to a disgusting extent. More than 31 tons of Venezuelan gold deposited in the Bank of England, calculated at $1.3 billion, is held hostage. The robbery of the Citgo Petroleum Corporation company, valued at more than $10 billion in February, is another fact that is added to the $10 billion deposited in foreign banks that are illegally blocked. But these illegal sanctions have never been able to break the will of our people, but they have strengthened our awareness and our determination to be free. They have not taken us away from our path either towards social justice, even in the worst circumstances. Our model protects and prioritizes the individual and their social rights, access to housing, education, health, work and culture. This act of piracy against our homeland, nevertheless, has left deep wounds in society. Amongst them, forced migration that we hear about, but with political and propagandistic ends in the media. Nothing is said, however, about the 60% of the Venezuelan population that migrated, but that has voluntarily returned to their country, fleeing the conditions of slavery and exploitation, as well as the mistreatment and persecution that they have been subjected to in very many countries of the world. This also hides from the world the fact that the Venezuelan state is the only state that has a policy of repatriation through our airline Conviasa, which is consistently boycotted by illegal sanctions. We'd like to ask multilateral organizations, what's happened to the millions of resources that were supposed to be there to help Venezuelan migrants? It would be useful to have some sort of accountability in order to explain the situation with regard to where this money has gone. In the same way, we call upon multilateral organizations to guarantee the rights of all migrants throughout the world, and we do this with the moral authority of being a country that for more than 100 years has been exercising good practices towards the migrant population. Along these lines, we would warn the peoples of the world about the outbreak of xenophobia and rejection of the poor, hate crimes and hate speech and general intolerance incubated by neo-fascist and neo-Nazi movements that find a home in ultra-conservative parties and governments of the far right. Humanity that is listening to us today needs to know that the most extreme conditions that we have mentioned here have not meant that our people have surrendered. On the contrary, we have built our path towards social peace, economic recovery, and the strengthening of democracy. We know ourselves very well what adversity is and the miracles that come from willingness and one's own efforts. We're working towards social peace, and we have implemented an economic plan to address the embargo, opening up new sources of wealth such as tourism, national industrialization, entrepreneurship, and farming development. For the first time in 120 years, we are producing 80% of what we consume. So we can affirm that we are able to pool our efforts together in order to face the great threats that are facing the world. We are one of the major global powers in the area of oil and gas production. Venezuela can and wants to be useful as a member of OPEC in this energy emergency that we have seen now for more than a decade, and which is very much affecting the system of prices and supply and having an impact on the poorest countries and also on the richest. The COVID-19 pandemic and the conflict between Ukraine and Russia is worsening the situation dramatically. But over and above this historic position of guaranteeing, as we are a very important producer in terms of energy balance, we are concerned by the impact of various global conflicts and how that affects food security. Venezuela has 30 million farmable hectares, and we are convinced that only by returning to sustainable agriculture will it be possible to overcome hunger and global poverty. We are making available our abilities in the firm conviction that we need to work actively in searching for global solutions. Undoubtedly, all nations are affected by various problems, each of them very complex and very serious, so much so that it's difficult to establish a hierarchy with those problems. But perhaps of all those problems, the most important one is that of global peace and security, today severely undermined by the events that all that have spoken before me have mentioned. Irrespective of ideological positions, we must agree on the need to give a priority to the re-establishment of the diplomatic path, political dialogue, over and above military confrontation. Humanity will not survive a world war.
A nadie conviene.
No, we will not survive a world war in any part of the world. For my country, a people that has never participated in an armed international conflict, there is no other path other than peace, justice, trust, and respect for international law. We therefore agree with the proposal of President Andrés Manuel López Obrador, who advocates for the creation of an international commission to facilitate sovereign dialogue between Russia and Ukraine, and we are there to facilitate this process. We reject all military provocations and economic sanctions that have been taken against Russia, as well as the hate campaign that has been launched against the Slavic people, because we believe these actions, rather than helping peace, incite the guns of war. In the eyes of my country, and I'm sure that a lot of peoples would agree with me, there are no good and bad wars. After the invasion by the United States of Afghanistan in 2001, trust was lost in the international community. What was being followed was imperialism and supremacism. We saw blood shed unnecessarily with impunity in Iraq, Yemen, Haiti, Somalia, Libya, and Syria, just to mention a few milestones in this shameless tragedy that is laying waste to indispensable international law. Nevertheless, in Venezuela, we have reasons to be optimistic. We have learnt to trust in peoples, in their intelligence, in their benevolence, and in their adherence to justice and true life. But we have to recognize that the dominant global order is facing multiple crises that are competing in their lethal potential, but they are interrelated. The climate crisis is worsening the food crisis. The health crisis is making worse the social crisis. The energy crisis is worsening as we see a worsening of the economic crisis, and this is threatening global peace. And across the board, we have the none less pernicious crisis of truth, with the pollution of the news media and fake news. We are seeing a system of representation, prevarication, and suppression of reality that is imposed by algorithms of new technologies of communication. This for the convenience of the most powerful. The manipulation of information and emotions is only part of the problem. We're seeing a global security surveillance state that deprives citizens of privacy, true information, turning our democracies into infocracies, as was stated by the South Korean philosopher Byung-Chul Han in his recent book. The death of the truth is the most clear symptom of the decline of a civilization and the preamble to perpetual conflict. Let us not allow truth to die at this historic moment when we have so many possibilities to apply truth together with reason and common sense. This is the antidote to collapse. The peoples of America, Europe, Asia, Africa, and Oceania know that in this multidimensional crisis, given its transcendental and definitive nature, we have to approach this with humanity, getting to the heart of the problem. Where is the fault line that will make this imperial order waver, collapse? In this imperial world which denies, attacks, and attempts to suppress the other, to suppress difference, and does not recognize other models, other political, economic, and religious and cultural paradigms that are different to its own. In spite of the arrogance of the West, we are seeing a change in the post-imperial order, and the North must recognize that the unipolar colonialist system cannot adequately respond to the problems and needs that they themselves have created, harming humanity, animal life, and the planet. According to our vision of the world, human beings are the most exploited, vulnerable, and destroyed by capitalism in all of its historic phases. We are not just making any old ideological statement. The climate crisis is now irreversible. So this tells us that we need to change the model. The North needs to accept new powers and new leadership, such as China, Russia, India, Iran, Turkey. They have to open up to the possibility of being part of a multipolar, multi-center world free of hegemony. It is urgent that there be an ethical change amongst the powers in order to build a common world without colonizers or the colonized, where we work together towards solutions, the solutions that our peoples demand of us. There is no time for super powers and unnecessary confrontations. For 207 years, in very similar circumstances, the freedom fighter Simón Bolívar, in his letter from Jamaica, referred to the doctrine of the West, civilized Europe that is allowing an old snake to devour the best part of our globe. And he continued, is Europe deaf to its own interests? And in this regard, President Nicolas Maduro asked himself, is the leadership in Europe and North America deaf? We ask ourselves today about this crisis and whether it could be the last crisis for humanity. Venezuela hopes that in this assembly we will listen to reason, to prudence, and that we recognize and respect the rights of the peoples of the world, and that we address the injustice being committed against the Sahrawi people and the Palestinian people by denying them the right to have their homeland. And we hope that we will put an end to illegal economic sanctions and political persecution against Nicaragua and against our brotherly Cuba, Iran, and Russia. We pray that the Argentinian people will be able to regain their sovereignty over the Malvinas. Only dialogue can do this. Only words and reason shared between equals will be able to build the bridges that we need in order to heal these wounds and leave behind these things that terrorize humanity. I write this message not simply for the summit, but I am thinking about the streets where men and women walking around New York, Istanbul, London, Damascus, Ramallah, Tehran, Cape Town, Moscow, Beijing, Managua, Havana, Caracas, and very many more places. They are not looking for responses, but they want to be part of the building of a new humanity. And because I believe in the power of words, and because I believe in this man and in this woman that refuse to give up hope, I am sure that this assembly will not remain in a vacuum. I recognize that this global hegemony is coming to an end, and we need the necessary enthusiasm to build a new multicentric, multipolar, intercultural and balanced world. Let us change what needs to be changed, and let's have the courage to be reborn in new times and new challenges. Another world, another life is not only possible, but more than ever before today, it is a matter of urgency. Caracas, the 24th of September of 2022, Nicolas Maduro Moros. Thank you very much.
I thank the Minister of the People's Power for Foreign Affairs of Bolivarian Republic of Venezuela.